Hello and welcome to the Underhive. We are back with some more How to Command the Death Guard. In this series, we're going to take a look at every aspect of the Death Guard, so whether you're looking to get more out of your army, or you're thinking of dipping a toe in Nurgle's crusty cauldron, then there's something here for you. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the main man himself, Primarch of the 14th, the lead chosen of Nurgle, Mortarion himself. So let's dive in and take a look at the new Nephilim changes and what Mortarion brings to the table. So in case you're familiar to how Mortarion works generally, I'm going to address the Nephilim changes first for you. First and foremost, he's gone down by 40 points to 450 points. Given that Poxwalkers have also gone down in price to 5 points each, that's 8 Poxwalkers worth. So you'll quite likely be able to squeeze in an extra squad of 10 by finding another 10 points in the list elsewhere. So you can fill up a cheap troop slot and perhaps allow you to spend more in your elite, fast attack or heavy support, where some of the key damage dealers are. And I think if you're taking Mortarion, you probably are going to have to skimp on the troops a little bit. So the fact that Poxwalkers have come down as well to 5 is very nice. On average, it's saving you 10 to 20 points on them alone. So all in all, a great change in terms of Mortarion being more prominently selected for lists, because he's a cool character, he's a great character, but the 490 price tag was a bit of a stretch for most lists. So coming down to 450, in and of itself, fantastic. Now, Supreme Command detachments are another point as well. This didn't change as a result of Warzone Nephilim, but it changed since the Codex came out at least. So Mortarion is not a HQ. So you're going to have to run a Supreme Command detachment and most likely a battalion. You might take a patrol. I doubt you'll fit a brigade in alongside Mortarion, but you could. The Supreme Command detachment itself is free, and it refunds the amount of command points for the core detachments, patrols, brigades, and battalions. So the battalion isn't costing you an extra 3 on top, even though your Warlord will be Mortarion in virtually every scenario where you bring him, but you are getting the refund off the back of the Supreme Command detachment itself. So no detriment caused there, all things good so far. The one downside is that you now have to pay for Warlord traits and relics. Now, Mortarion can't take a relic, so that's not inherently a downgrade if you just don't take one now, but you're basically not getting the free one, so it's still a loss either way as a result of Nephilim. However, the way the Warlord trait stratagem works is a bit of a point of contention for people, and I can totally understand why people playing against Death Guard would argue against my opinion, but I'm going to justify it here for you. So, there is no free Warlord trait and relic, but there is a new core stratagem for all armies, which is Warlord trait, give a Warlord trait for 1 CP. Can only use that once. From there, you would rely on your Codex stratagems to give out extras. And there is a stratagem for relic to give the first relic. And again, any extras would come off the back of stratagems in the Codex. Now, on the Warlord trait page, which I'm struggling to locate here, there we go. On the Warlord trait page, it covers the Warlord traits, and at the bottom, it says named characters and Warlord traits. If one of the following characters gains a Warlord trait, they must have the one shown below. Typhus must have Shamble Rot. There's only one. He must have that one, if he's having a Warlord trait. Mortarion, however, has 3. He has Revoltingly Resilient, Living Plague, and Arch Contaminator. Now, I've seen it said that you get to pick one, and I've seen it said that you pay for all 3. And I'm going to explain why I don't believe either of those things are true, but I'd be delighted to hear your opinion, so do feel free to let me know in the comments, and I will definitely get back to you. So the wording here, if one of the following characters gains a Warlord trait, so that means you can pick, so you don't have to give him one. They must have the one shown below. And the wording there almost acts like a logic loop. So Revoltingly Resilient is written, so if he has one, he must have Revoltingly Resilient. But Living Plague is also shown below, so he must also have that one as well, if he's having a Warlord trait. Same goes with Arch Contaminator. If he's having a Warlord trait, he must have that one shown below as well. Now, the fact that they've used the word one is, I think, what confuses the matter. But so few Warlords have multiple Warlord traits they have to take. I don't personally know of any others, but I've not played every army. Mortarion's the only model I know of where this is a question even. But my understanding of it is that it would be like a for loop. The situation is, if he's having a Warlord trait, he must have this one 3 times. So he must have all 3. Now, for me, you would get all 3 for the Nephilim Stratagem Warlord trait. And the reason I believe that is because you pay that for the Revolt in the Resilient, say, but he must also have Living Plague and Arch Contaminator. There is no stratagem in the Codex to give a second Warlord trait to the same character. You can give another Warlord trait out to another character that doesn't have one, but you can't give the same character to. Now, there are codexes where that is a rule. Chaos Knights, for example, is the one I'm most familiar with. You can give a second to the same character. But again, that's to account for the fact that Knights have few models, and you might want to. You might wish to double down on the effect. Whereas Death Guard, you don't need that. You'll have a lot of characters, so it's fair enough that you can't double down and make one very, very tough and perhaps unkillable to certain armies. So that's my 2 pence on the matter. You pay the 1 CP, you get all 3 Warlord traits, and that's that. There's no stratagem to pay for the extras on top of 1, so you can't do that. I haven't seen anything from GW errataing that specifically, so unless that is errated and they change that wording, that is the way I would run it. I would have that discussion with my opponent. If they disagreed, we'd look to come to some arrangement. But if my opponent was running Mortarion and that's what they were wanting to do, I would be fully behind it because I think that is built into its cost. If we look at something like Guilliman, who's gone down to 300 points, Guilliman doesn't have as much ability as Mortarion. First and foremost, he's not a psyker, so you're already, you're paying less because of that. But Guilliman not only has the same, Supreme Command stuff as Mortarion, the detachment's free, and it refunds your battalion or whatever you bring in, but Guilliman gives you 3 command points on top. That is the sort of effect that I see this as. You pay 1 and you get 2 free. But it's a model that costs 50% more than Guilliman, so that is baked into some of that point increase, and the fact that he's a psyker and can fly and all the other bits. So that's the way I read it. I think at 450 that makes perfect sense, and I think at 450 he's a good full package. And the point being, I think if you had to run him without all 3 of those Warlord traits, he'd start to lose the flavour of what he actually is. So I am firmly in the camp that you pay 1, you get all 3, but again, let me know what you think. So that's really the changes as far as Nephilim, but let's get into the rest of what Mortarion brings to the table in case you're not familiar. So let's find him here. There he is. So I'm going to cover his datasheet profiles second. To begin with, I'm going to cover his abilities. So, first and foremost, he's got Disgustingly Resilient and Contagions of Nurgle. Disgustingly Resilient, a flat -1 damage to a minimum of 1. Contagions of Nurgle also combines with this Toxic Presence. This model counts the battle round as being 4 for the purposes of determining the range of the contagion abilities it has. So he has a permanent 9-inch contagion range, which makes Mortarion a really nice pick for Flash Outbreak because you'll just get the 9-inch aura even if you're not using Gift of Contagion as a spell. If you do use that, it will go up to the maximum 12. It won't go to 15. Now, one other thing to note, he is a Heretic Astartes, so he does get Armour of Contempt, which is very nice because he's only got a 3-up save. He also has Host of Plagues. At the start of the first battle round, so this happens when the game has begun. You're not paying a CP for it in my book, because it's an ability you're paying the points for. At the start of the first battle round, select one of the following Warlord traits, and then it lists all 7 of the 7 individual Plague Company Warlord traits. You cannot select one that another model in the army already has, Until the end of the battle round, this model gains, until the end of the battle, the full game, this model gains the selected Warlord trait in addition to any others it has, even if it's not your Warlord. The fact that it says any others, it would be applicable if there was only one, I suppose, but that I think is another nod to the fact that he will always have 3 plus this one. You could take that either way, but I think that's another nod for the fact that, yeah, he has 3. So you can do that even if he's not your Warlord. But again, he has the ability here, Demon Primarch. If your army's Battleforged, this model must be the Warlord. If you have more than one model that says that, then you can pick. But there aren't any other models with this effect in the Death Guard Codex. So unless you're running some kind of weird soup list, and I'm not even sure it's possible to do more than one Supreme Command, but unless you're running some kind of weird soup list with Magnus in it, you wouldn't be picking. It would just be Mortarion. Now, going back to the host of plagues there. So, you can pick a Contagion Warlord trait from a company that you're not taking as the detachment. And that's because Mortarion's in charge of all of it, not just one plague company. So, I myself, I've said it before, I like the Inexorable because I like Ferret Blight. So, I could take an Inexorable detachment and also include Gloaming Blow on Mortarion. The important thing here is that some of the Contagion Warlord traits, like Ferret Blight, are reliant on the keyword of that company to have an effect. This is Ferret Blight. While an enemy is in contagion range of the unit, each time an attack's made by a friendly inexorable model against that enemy unit, improve the armor penetration by 1. So if you were to take one of the other plague companies, not inexorable, and then you were to slap Ferret Blight on Mortarion, it's doing nothing because none of the models you have are inexorable models. Whereas if you take inexorable as the plague company, then that will work as intended, but you could also take Gloaming Blow. And personally, I think Gloaming Blow is the best pick for Mortarion. It's the strongest effect, and it doesn't rely on any particular Mortarion Anvil models being present. So Gloaming Blow, while an enemy is in contagion range, the enemy unit cannot fire Overwatch, cannot set to defend, and cannot re-roll hit rolls or wound rolls. So of course, hit rolls and wound roll re-rolling is a very common effect. You'll certainly see it across Space Marine armies very commonly, but most armies will bring re-roll ones to hit. So denying that, very nice. And denying Overwatch and set to defend is more benefit than it might appear on face value, because at the bare minimum, Mortarion does want to charge, and they would Overwatch Mortarion, particularly if they've got abilities to make that easier, like Iron Hand Space Marines can do it on a 4 for 2 CP. Tau have obviously got great Overwatch, so armies like that don't want Mortarion coming close would want to Overwatch, so denying them that ability is phenomenal. So personally, I think Gloaming Bloat's the best one to take on him, but again, that applies to any of them. Just don't pick one that's going to rely on being that plague company, unless that's what you want to do and you didn't want to take a different company with a different contagion. So again, very powerful stuff in my opinion. So coming back to the abilities here, he's got Primarch of the Death Guard. In your command phase, select one Death Guard core or one Death Guard character within 6 inches of this model until the start of your next command phase. Each time a model in that unit makes an attack, you can re-roll the hit roll. So that's full re-rolls. Doesn't have to fail. You can re-roll whatever you like. So if you've got any effects that require 6s to hit, then that would be great. You can try and double down on it, or you can just take the hits and re-roll the misses. The important thing there is that this is the only ability in the Codex that will allow a character full re-rolls to hit outside of the relic Warp Insect Hive, which does give full re-rolls to hit and full re-rolls to wound, but only in melee. Now, most of the characters that you'll pick probably are primarily melee anyway, so that's not an outright negative for the Warp Insect Hive, but this, importantly, is a buff that Mortarion can give to himself. Now, Mortarion's hitting on 2s unless there's a debuff involved, but particularly if there is a debuff, you don't really want any of Mortarion's attacks failing the hit roll, so giving it to himself is often a great pick, but he might not be in a position where it's that important. He might be finishing off a near-dead unit and go, you know what, I think giving it to the Death Shroud's going to be more important this turn. They can have full rerolls to hit. Now, with that being said, those Death Shroud would need to be within 6, And he does also have the Lord of the Death Guard aura, which is while friendly Death Guard core is within 6, each time it makes an attack, you can reroll 1 to hit. So again, Death Shroud hit on 2s, so they only need to reroll 1s unless there's a debuff involved. Quite often, you'll probably pick to give Mortarion his own rerolls to hit, but there will be times where you'll pick another model, probably because there's a debuff involved or because they're not Death Shroud. He's also got the Barbaran Plate, which is a 4-up invuln permanently. And he does have Putrid Explosion. So when he dies on a 4-up, he explodes, dealing D3 mortal wounds within 6 inches, excluding Nurgle units. So it doesn't hurt your own units, but also, important to note, it doesn't hurt Abaddon, because Abaddon has the Nurgle keyword, as do Nurgle demons. So certain CSM lists will be able to mitigate that a little bit, but again, it's just a nice added bonus. If he does die, maybe he can take something with him, but he's not going to be taking Abaddon with him. So that's it for the abilities on the profile there. We have mentioned already he's got Armor of Contempt, so bear in mind he is reducing AP by 1. The majority of the time your opponent is attacking him, they're going to be attacking with AP, so it is effectively a pseudo 2-up save. But if they decide to go at you with low strength, no AP, single damage shots, then of course it is a 3-up save. Now, for now, before we get onto the psychic powers and his abilities and things, I just want to take a moment to talk about the weaknesses of Mortarion. So, firstly, he has 18 wounds, and we'll come back to that. But what that means is that he cannot benefit from cover. He's a very large model, and so if we're talking like true line of sight, it's very hard to put him in a position where he would be behind cover, is the point. So even though that rule exists, it means he doesn't benefit from cover, most terrain wouldn't fully cover him with the bit that provides cover anyway, and your opponent can say, well, I can see the wing outside the cover, I'm shooting the wing. Perfectly fine. So that's one of the reasons why that rule exists, in my opinion, because it's just, let's avoid the argument, he doesn't get cover because he's just too big. But certain maps will have obscuring pieces of terrain that are, let's say, a multi-story building with no windows. So it's not line of sight permitting, it is completely obscuring. Not just obscuring if you're behind it and not touching it, you can be in it and nobody can see through it. Now, as long as that building is tall enough and wide enough, and you position him sort of side on, so his wings take up the minimum space of visibility that they can, then there are certain maps where you can hide Mortarion, but you cannot do it in every map. So the point is, your opponent is very likely going to be able to shoot him, and if they go first, they are going to shoot him. Bottom line is, 450 point models, just kill them. Kill them quick, get them out of the game, because it's the easiest way to put your opponent on the back foot. They do not want Mortarion charging at them. They're going to kill him before he gets there, if they've got the opportunity. So let's take a look at that. Now, we'll come back to the rest of the profile, but as we've said there, he's got 18 wounds, and he's toughness 8. He's got a 3-up save with Armor of Contempt, and he's got that Revoltingly Resilient. So he's mitigating 1 out of 3 wounds he takes, even mortal wounds. So although they bypass the armor, the toughness, all that jazz, they don't bypass the Revoltingly Resilient, so he's going to save 1 in 3 of those mortal wounds that do manage to get through. So he's effectively got more like 24 wounds. That isn't the way it's always going to work out. You might end up with it effectively being more or less, and in games where he doesn't get hit that much, maybe you do really well on the armor saves, then it's completely academic because he didn't die, so it didn't matter how many wounds he had as a maximum. But either way around, 24 wounds is an awful lot to chew through on average. So if we consider he's got a 2-up save, AP -1 puts him on his 3-up, AP -2 puts him on his 4-up invul. Anything more than AP2 is wasted. Melters and anything lower than Strength 8 are only getting a 4-up to wound at best. Las cannons and the like will be wounded on 3, so they're probably the more dangerous. There are things like big heavy neutron lasers, strength 12 from the AdMech Dune crawlers, and of course things like knights have a lot more above strength 8. So again, there are certain armies that will be able to provide a significant shooting threat, mainly if they're wide with las cannons. With the reduction to eliminators now, the fact that they can take the las fusils free, I think you'll probably see a lot more las fusils taking up the heavy slot in terms of eliminators in the heavy slot for Marines, and they are a pretty good profile against Mortarion. I believe they're strength 9, but they might not be. If they're 8, then you can disregard that. I haven't looked at that since the change. But either way around, his profile here being toughness 8 means you're very unlikely to wound him unless you're really committing heavy firepower to it. And then even if you do, he's got a 50-50 chance to ignore it on the invuln. And then even if you get through that, he's got a 1 in 3 chance to ignore the damage, and he's reducing damage by 1. So if we just look at the worst case scenario for a general army, let's just say las cannons, and let's just pick 20. Most armies are not going to have 20, but let's just see how this will work out. So 20 las cannons hitting on 3s, you get 2/3 of those, so let's say that's 14. Just if they do a bit better than average. So 14 go through. They're at strength 9, so they're going to be wounded on 3s. So 2/3 of those go through. So that's going to be, say, 9 get through. He's then halving those with his invuln save on average. So let's say 5 of those get through. And then they're d6 damage each. Let's say the average damage is 4. He's reducing that to 3. And then he's going to ignore, on average, 1 of those damages. So that would be a total of 2 going through out of each of those 5 that have been quite generous in affording your opponent there. Out of 20 las cannon shots, he would take 10 damage, say. Now again, that's a very, very rough math, but it's just to show you there, even against a weapon that is strong against him, it's still not going to kill him in a single shooting phase that often. Certain armies like Tau that can really pump out high profile strength, high AP, high damage attacks, they may have more to say about that, but your typical army is not going to have 20 las cannons. They're not going to have a means to deal shot after shot after shot that is stronger than toughness 8. So for the most part, he will survive turn 1, but you just need to be aware that if you can mitigate any of it by obscuring him turn 1, that will be in your interest to do, because your opponent doesn't want to be shooting at everything else. They want to be shooting at him. So if you can deny that, they're then going to have to position differently, pick other targets, and then you can capitalize on them moving out of position on turn 2, and most likely move your full 12, and then most likely get a charge on something that they've placed out in the mid board. So as it goes, besides that, his only other weakness really is that mass 1 damage, no AP fire, he's only got a 3-up save against. He doesn't reduce the damage because it's only to a minimum of 1, and the 5-up invul, 5-up feel no pain is fine, but against 100 shots, it's not going to save that many. Now again, there's not many armies that are going to build that way because countering Mortarion isn't a priority when you're building an all-comers list, but it's something to be aware of. And the other side of the coin is mortal wounds bypass all of his other toughness other than revoltingly resilient, and unless you're rolling 5s and 6s protecting him there, he is going to take that damage an awful lot of the time. Something like Guardsmen with their, I think it's Hammer of the Emperor, I think that's the rule. They can get mortal wounds on a given roll when they're firing las guns. That sort of profile is actually really dangerous to Mortarion. Yes, they're low strength, they're not likely to wound him, but they can rack up 20, 40, 60, 80 shots fairly easily through first rank, second rank fire and having large squads. So they can pump out an awful lot of dice there. And yes, they might only get 6s to wound against him, but that is something that will still push some damage. And again, having only a 3-up save against that, some is gonna squeeze through. Now, then I don't think even 40 Guardsmen with, I think it's Hammer of the Emperor and first rank fire, second rank fire, isn't likely to kill him in a single turn. But the point is, if they even do like 5 to 10 damage to him across 2 turns, that is still really significant value. They're really cheap units in comparison to Mortarion, and he can't kill them all at once. So if they can stagger their lines and do that over multiple turns, he isn't going to pay for himself chewing through Guardsmen because they're just too cheap. You need to get him past that front line, which, he can fly, so he can do that. But you need to get him past that front line of screening units and into you know, if we're talking about guard, the basilisks, or, you know, what other heavy support they have, because they're the units that Mortarion really shines against. They can't do anything back to him in melee for those units, and he has the profiles to make them pay. And they give him his value back by killing 2 or 3 units of that sort. So that's pretty much it for his weaknesses. Let's move on to him being a Psyker. So he can cast 2 powers, and he can attempt to deny 3. So the fact that he's got loads of movement means you'll probably get him in range to deny. One of his weaknesses is mortal wounds. Your opponent's probably going to want to target him with smites and other direct damage. He can look to deny it himself and just nip it in the bud. And if he doesn't do that, he's still got his 5 up, feel no pain. So whilst psychic powers are a threat to him, the fact that he can deny 3 and he's often going to be in the position to attempt that deny means he's got a decent enough chance to knock some of it out before it gets to the point of hurting him. And then that does, he can at least try to deny with his 5 up, feel no pain. He can cast 2 powers, but he does know 3 powers from the Contagion discipline and Smite as well. So he's got a good bit of flexibility, great denial, and 2 powers is very nice. Again, particularly given he's got the 9-inch guaranteed Contagion range, something like the Curse of the Leper, which is reliant on your opponent's toughness, can be a very good pick on Mortarion. Throw that out at the closest unit that you weren't planning to attack, and then perhaps make a charge that's an inch longer into another unit that isn't yet affected by any damage. So you might get the leadership failure on them from the Curse of the Leper damage, and you'll also go in and just absolutely blender whoever you've charged. So yeah, there's a lot of versatility there, a lot of ways to actually split damage out and it not be a bad thing, because when Mortarion gets in melee, he pretty much always finishes it. There are certain units that have a decent profile against him, but most stuff doesn't stand up to him. You can't, is the point. You can't have a go at them for it. They were never meant to win that fight. So let's take a look at the profile here. So Mortarion has brackets. Now, for his brackets, he only loses 2-inch move and 1 attack. So he's not like a knight or a dreadnought or whatever. He doesn't lose weapon skill, ballistic skill. He just fatigues slightly. So he can't move as far. He can't make as many attacks. So on his top profile, he's got 12-inch. His mid profile kicks in at 9-inch. His mid profile kicks in at 9 wounds remaining. So that is 10-inch move. And his bottom profile kicks in at 5 wounds remaining. He's only then got an 8-inch move. But that's still pretty significant compared to the speed of the rest of the army. So I don't think that that's that big a drawback. It's understandable. It is a drawback, but it's not too detrimental. I think that's probably preferential over affecting his weapon skill, ballistic skill. It also reduces his attack. So at his top profile, he's got 7 attacks. Blessed. On his mid profile, he's got 6. And his bottom profile, he has 5. So he can still deal out a good amount of damage, but on the bottom profile, you will probably miss the missed 2 attacks. So in terms of his loadout, in fact, let's cover the rest of the profile first. So he always has weapon skill, ballistic skill 2. He's always strength 8. He's always toughness 8. He's always leadership 10. And he's always got a 3-up save. And I say always, that is outside of opponents doing things to affect that. They can do so unless you deny it with psychic powers, etc. So bottom line is, he's always going to be fairly tough unless they've got a means to reduce his toughness or to go like +1 to wound. You do need to be careful of that, because something wounding on 5s that's then getting +1 to wound, all of a sudden that does increment a bit more damage coming through. But at the end of the day, your opponent's got to do something to try and kill him. You're making them have to make that decision, and there is some value in that. So first up for the shooting, he has Lantern, which is a 12-inch pistol 1, strength 8, AP -3, damage 3. So not many shots, not big range, but it will probably kill something if it goes through. Certainly an infantry model anyway. Each time an attack is made by this weapon, if a hit is scored, so you've passed the hit roll, not necessarily dealt damage, so you draw a straight line between the closest point of this model's base or hull and that of the closest model in the target unit. So your opponent's going to pick who takes the wounds, but the line is drawn to the closest unit regardless of who's taking the damage. So they do have control over that. If you've made them aware of this rule, they'll probably place the models so that the closest one is the one that's going to be drawing the line, but that line isn't going to pass through anything else. So you're not guaranteed to get this extra effect. If your opponent knows what to do, they will do it. But if they don't, you would make a wound roll against the target unit and each other unit that the line passes through. So you can make it a profile where it does multiple hits as long as the first hit lands and that line goes through any other units. The issue is 12-inch range, so you've got to be right up close to get multiple units in range of it, and even then, it's just like your opponent's probably going to position well enough. It's just not something you can rely on. When it comes off, it's nice, you might kill an extra model or two, but otherwise, it's nothing to write home about. The thing that baffles me is that, yes, Lantern is a pistol in the hands of Mortarion, but to anybody else, that would be a heavy weapon, and you would expect it to have a bit more range than 12-inch. Not only that, but he is a Primarch. So, if we're talking it's like eyesight or, the confusion of the battlefield, if anybody can see further than 12-inch, it would be the Primarch. So it doesn't make any sense to me. To be honest, I think they could get rid of the other rule and just make it Pistol 3 24-inch, and you'd be happy with that. Perhaps that's more of a buff than is warranted there, but I don't know. I just think it makes Lantern feel kind of trash when there's no need for it to feel trash. They could just change the profile a bit and make it good to use. But hey, I'm not a designer. You've also got Phosphex bombs, so when you're within 6 inch, you probably will want to use Phosphex bombs unless you're planning to shoot a heavy vehicle. It's a 6-inch range as with all grenades. Again, I don't understand that because Mortarion can probably hoof a grenade a lot further than the equivalent distance that 6-inch would be relative to the model size. Given he flies as well, he'd have to be throwing it downwards to only reach 6 inches. So I think they could have done a bit better with that. But again, rules are rules. So it's grenade 2d6. It is blast. So again, if there's more than 6 models, you're guaranteed 3 each of those 2d6. If there's 11 or more models, you're guaranteed a full 6. But regardless of how many shots, they're not auto hits. So you do have to roll the hits on a 2-up unless there's debuffs. Strength 5, AP -1, damage 1, so it's a better option against hordes. There isn't really a middle ground, because it's like, well, if you want to shoot elite infantry, the Phosphex bombs aren't necessarily going to get there, particularly against Space Marines, who will Armor of Contempt that AP away. Whereas Lantern's only probably going to be one shot, and it's like, well, yeah, killing one of them's probably neither here nor there, and they're going to have an armor save, most likely, so you might not get anything. So he just feels a bit lackluster in shooting, which is a bit of a shame. But the other side of the coin is he is mobile. He is a powerhouse in melee. He can't be great at everything. He's also very good at sidekick as well. So he's got to have a weakness, and I'm fair enough with it being shooting. In terms of melee, so he does have the added bonus of the attendants, claws, and teeth. So his little minions down at the bottom there following him around. Whenever he attacks, he makes an additional d6 attacks with this weapon. Strength 2, AP 0, damage 1. It is a plague weapon though, so you can reroll 1s to wound. You will need it because you'll be wounding most stuff on 5s, if not 6s. So, I mean, you don't expect to get a lot of damage out of that. It's just there for a bit of fun, in my opinion. I like to use it as tracer attendants first, just to let the opponent know the attendants are there. They are watching. They didn't hurt you, but they are grabbing at you. Now Mortarion's going to come in and finish you off. So just a bit of fun. That's not actually a rule. So Silence, his main weapon, his main armament he's bringing here. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, select one of the 2 profiles below. So the eviscerating blow is the heavy attack. So that is strength times 2. So it's a strength 16 given his profile, assuming no debuffs. So again, that's wounding pretty much everything on 2s, because even a toughness 9 Land Raider would go down to toughness 8 as a result of his contagion. So wounding pretty much everything on 2s, rerolling 1s for the plague weapon. AP -4, great amount of AP, pretty much takes saves off everything but Space Marines, unless they've got an invul. And if they don't, and the Space Marines, it's only a 6-up, so they're not going to save many of them. And the damage is D3 + 3. So it's a very consistent 4 to 6 damage, pretty much kills any elite infantry model per hit, and if they're not an infantry model, it's killing most tanks in a few hits. So that's that. It is even potential, like the maximum output of that is 42 damage. You're not guaranteed to get that very often by any means, but the point is he can chew through a knight very capably. He only needs half the maximum damage to do that. The minimum damage, if he gets all attacks through, is 28, which on its own is enough to kill knights. As long as he gets a lot of the attacks through, you're very likely to kill whatever it's up against. The Reaping Scythe, the strength is user, so it'd be strength 8, AP -2, damage 1. Each time an attack's made with this weapon, make 3 hit rolls instead of 1. So on his top profile, 21 attacks, and it is a plague weapon, so you can reroll 1s to wound. Now, he does have Arch Contaminator, but again, the wording on Contaminator does not include the word character. It is just core. Just core. So he doesn't get the benefit of his own Arch Contaminator, sadly, but it is what it is. So he can reroll 1s on those. It's fine to chew through a horde. You probably don't want to put 7 massive damage attacks into a horde that's there slowing you down. You probably don't want to fall back. So if you do get tagged with something, a chaffy unit, you probably will have to spend a turn chopping through them. The Reaping Scythe gives you the best opportunity to do that. But the important thing there is just that if you let your opponent tag him, you limit yourself to just that target this turn. So if your opponent can tag him with a set of units that they don't care about losing as much as something else, then they are winning a moral victory there. You need to make sure that when you're engaging, if you can kill what you're killing, consolidate into your next target, or try and consolidate in such a way that is still allowed, but moves you away from the sort of thing that your opponent's going to want to tag you with in future, if you can. So that's that pretty much. That's his whole profile. That's what he brings to the party. I think the 450 points is a good price for him. I think you'd probably still bring him at 490, but it's a welcome change. I think drawing the comparison to Guilliman, whilst Guilliman obviously should be cheaper, he isn't as good a model in and of himself. He is a very powerful model. He does an awful lot of stuff. He can come back from the dead. He gives you 3 command points. He's a hell of a beat stick in melee in and of himself. So, I don't think it's unreasonable to say you get the 3 Warlord traits for 1 command point, and you're paying 450 for him because he has the extra stuff over something like Guilliman. I think that's completely reasonable. And I think I'm going to probably pick up a Mortarion model soon. I've never been that interested in it because the opponent can shoot him off the board. But given the changes now, I think we're probably less likely to see the sorts of characters that really augment that sort of strategy. And therefore, shooting him off the board becomes that bit less effective. We've also seen nerfs to the sorts of armies that really can target him, namely Eldari, Tau, and Tyranids. So the fact that those big 3 top-tier factions have come down a peg, and Death Guard as an army have gone up a peg, as well as Mortarion himself, I am quite interested in getting myself one. But my army I picked up in 8th when Blight Lords were better than they are now, in my opinion. So the next thing on my list is some Death Shroud, because I don't think you can run a list without Death Shroud now. Not without any sort of justification to yourself that you go, well, I just don't own the models. I certainly feel bad when I'm running 15 Blight Lords rather than probably 5 or 10 and some Death Shroud. I do still like the Blight Lords, but anyway, let's not get into that. I do still like them, but I'm definitely going to get some Death Shroud, and I probably will pick up a Mortarion in future now that this change has come to fruition. If you stuck all the way to the end, I really do appreciate it, because I did ramble a little bit there, so thank you so much for that. But otherwise, if you want to get involved, please do leave a comment, continue the discussion. I'll always get involved, give you an answer. If anything, it sometimes helps me come to a better conclusion than I could just off the cuff as I do these videos, so I really appreciate you doing that. But if you prefer, you could leave a like or a sub. It really does mean a lot to me. You know it helps me out, but I appreciate you taking the time to do it. Either way around, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time in the Underhive.